When's the last time you had a brilliant idea? Something you were genuinely, really, really excited about, only to watch it get torn to pieces in a Zoom meeting, like someone presumably dressed in some sort of corduroy. Well, today we're going to talk about why this keeps happening, and more importantly, what you can do about it. So let's do that. Now, unfortunately for you and for me, most of the decisions that are made in our little creative worlds are made by committees. And committees don't tend to kill bad ideas. They prefer to kill the good ones. Mainly because bad ideas are safe. They're predictable, they've been done before, and they're easy to defend. People can always point to a competitor and say, well, they did it, as if that's automatically some sort of good thing. On the flip side, good ideas are kind of dangerous. They're unfamiliar, unproven. I've spoken to well over 1,000 marketers in a sea of different companies, and I see the same pattern coming up again and again. So you bounce into a meeting with your cool, quirky, interesting new idea, then someone drops in and says, can we make it more professional? Another person bumps in and says, I'm not sure our audience is going to get this. Third person comes in, what if we just did what insert competitor name has done? Then it eventually gets watered down. You end up having to produce some safe, bland version of the idea. It performs the same as everything else they've ever done, which is obviously quite badly, and you rinse and repeat until infinity or death. Death probably comes first. So we all know when this kind of thing is happening. You know, you can feel it in your bones, you can feel it in the room, but we don't know how to defend our idea. We don't necessarily have the language to articulate why they're wrong and we're right. And that's hopefully what this video is about. I want to give you some weapons today, some weapons you can use to kill your committee. Not literally, of course. That is possibly a step too far. Possibly. I want to take you through 3 reasons committees tend to kill creative ideas. The first one is they make the measure become the target. That's probably not going to make much sense right now, but it will do in a minute. Number 2 is they don't value what they can't see. I'll also go into that in more detail. And the third one is they fear experimentation or exploration, right? So let's look at these individually. This is where a little thing known as Goodhart's law comes into play, which is when a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. In other words, the moment you pick one number to judge your success on, people stop trying to achieve the actual goal and just start to try and achieve the number. And that's when things generally fall apart. See, the decision maker you've got in front of you right now that's struggling to see your creative vision, they normally have got into their position because they're good with facts and figures. They've removed all emotion and subjectivity from their lives. And there is a very useful place for these people in society and in businesses. It's just not very effective in our creative worlds. So we need to figure out a way to communicate better with these people when we're both approaching things from a very different perspective. Committees love numbers because numbers feel safe. Numbers don't lie, and numbers are objective. They can be thrown on a spreadsheet, taken into a meeting, shoved in someone's face, and no one can argue with them. Creativity, on the other hand, hates being reduced down to a single metric. Creativity is emotional, it's messy, it's unpredictable, it leaves its pants on the floor, it throws up into fish bowls at parties. You get the idea. So when a committee is trying to optimize for one thing, your creative idea generally gets diluted and squeezed down until it's eventually completely murdered just to ensure this safe target can be reached. I'll give you an example of when this has happened in the past. In the early to mid 2000s, Nokia set themselves a single metric as a target, and the metric was to create the most number of phones in a year. So in 2004, they released 36 models, 2005, 40, and in 2008, 47. This resulted in messy, overcomplicated product lines, supply chain issues, blah, 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 and ultimately led to their decline in the whole smartphone race, which we all know how that played out. British Rail are another one. They did a similar thing when they tried optimizing for the number of trains that arrived on time. That simply resulted in people cheekily changing timetables and adding padding to every journey so they could still claim punctuality, but passengers didn't actually experience any improvements. They did hit the metric they were going for, but it was entirely pointless in terms of customer satisfaction. So what does this have to do with the people making decisions on our creativity? Well, tons. Our committee friends optimize for measurable metrics because they're easy to report and easy to defend. And people like things that are easy to defend because it means they can't get blamed for anything. When you think about it, our working lives are essentially a series of decisions led by us wanting to not be blamed for anything and just have an easy day. But when companies optimize for one metric, they damage the thing the metric was supposed to measure. For example, if you're optimizing for clicks, you create clickbait, which damages trust. If you're optimizing for professionalism, you create incredibly insipid, bland work that no one's going to remember. Let's remember that the I in KPI stands for indicator, but most of our committee friends use them as targets rather than indicators. This brings me on to the second reason committees tend to kill our creative ideas is that they don't value what they can't see. Let's imagine you're pulling up to a luxury hotel. A valet attendant comes out and greets you by name, opens your car door, takes your luggage, then parks your car. Now, from a purely functional perspective, what did the valet actually do? They parked your car and they carried your bag. That's two things you could have very easily done yourself. You probably could have actually done them faster and definitely done them cheaper. So why do luxury hotels offer this service in the first place, and why are customers prepared to even pay for it? Because the valet isn't just parking your car. What they're doing is they're creating implicit psychological value. They're status signaling. You think instantly, okay, I'm somewhere important. They're creating this first impression management, which sets the tone for your entire stay. They're showing this perceived care. Right, so this hotel pays attention to every detail. That's what you're thinking when you see this kind of thing. They're also helping you reduce some stress. You're not having to search for a parking spot. You're not having to pull out your own bags, pull them into the lobby. And they're creating the perception of luxury. This is instantly making you think that a premium level of service is awaiting you inside, and you haven't even walked through the door yet. So the problem here is the customers feel implicit value, and committees don't. What they look for is explicit function. Right? A committee looks at valet parking and thinks, why are we paying for something people can just do themselves? And what's the ROI on this? They're asking questions about the function of it, something customers don't care about. They care about how something makes them feel. And this is exactly what happens when creative decisions are being made. You're generally trying to communicate a feeling. You're trying to communicate a feeling within what you've felt when you were creating the work and a feeling the customer will get. All that person on the other end is thinking is, what's the function of this? How is this getting me to my single metric? This is a fantastic ad by McCann when they were looking for a copywriter. And it's just got a chewed pen lid and it says hungry copywriter wanted, and it does everything it needs to do. It's beautiful, it's simple, it's lovely, right? Now imagine this was put in front of a committee, right? This would probably go along the lines of, I can't read that font and that pen lid looks filthy. Can we use a nicer image? Why do we need so much empty space? And we should definitely be giving more information to get the applicants to apply. So you'd end up with something that looks like this, something very, very uninspiring and full of nonsense and technically not wrong, but just not in any way interesting and not in any way going to get the right people applying. So in other words, completely failing on the goal that the ad was set out to achieve in the first place. Your committees don't tend to be able to articulate why they think one design is better than the other. So they tend to define it by things that they find measurable. So things like, does it have all the information? Does it follow the brand guidelines? Is it professional? That's how you invariably end up with work that's technically fine. It's just not going to be remembered by anybody. And then the final reason that these committees kill creativity is they are terrified of exploration, terrified of exploring new ideas. I'm going to tell you a very brief story about ravens, right? Bear with me. So when they're young, when their ravens are young, they go out and explore new territories, looking for new places to eat, new foods. They're what's called, and I have to be careful about how I pronounce this, neophilic, right? Which is they're excited by new things. So they go out and they do all of this exploring. The older a raven gets, they tend to be the opposite of that, and they're way more cautious. And, they're essentially adults. Like kids go and explore things, and we all become, jaded versions of what we were when we were young, and we were too careful of things. So the young ravens go out and they explore, find new food things. They go back, they tell the adults are like, sweet, let's go, and we find more places of food. This is why ravens have managed to survive for millions of years across most continents on Earth. They understand that they need to do a certain amount of exploration. So this is what we need to communicate to our little committee friends. Think about the company that you're trying to get this idea across to at the minute, right? When was the last time they did something genuinely new? And I mean genuinely new, not new as in, oh, we've just changed the color of that button. Like genuinely new, something their competitors would never even dare. I'm guessing for most of you, the answer is they've never tried anything that different. The reason is most companies prefer to exploit rather than explore. That sounds dramatic, but the definition is thus. Explore essentially means trying new things, testing new channels, experimenting with bold creative, and exploiting means doing what's worked before, optimizing existing campaigns, playing it safe, blah, 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 blah. Because the exploration part is risky, and committees are designed to mitigate risk. So they'll stay away from it. What they don't realize is, especially now, playing it safe is the riskiest thing you can do. If you only exploit what's worked before, you're going to exhaust that strategy. Your competitors will copy you, your audience is going to get bored, and ultimately the performance will decline. And when that happens, you'll have no new strategies to fall back on because you never explored. Our Ravens understand this, so now let's get our little committee friends to understand it as well. How do we kill our committee? So now you understand why your ideas are dying. Let's look at what you can do to stop them dying. When someone in the committee challenges your idea, they're usually optimizing for a single metric: the clicks, the safety, the professionalism. Your job is to reframe the conversation around the outcome, the long-term goal, not the metric. So when you get feedback like this design feels too bold, can we make it more professional? You're going to come back and say, what outcome are we trying to achieve here? Because if we're trying to stand out in a crowded inbox, professionalism isn't going to cut it. But if we're trying to build trust with a certain audience, the bold idea signals confidence. So which outcome matters more? The trick here is to force the committee to articulate what they're actually optimizing for. And when they do, you can often show them why their metric is in conflict with the actual end goal. Remember our little valet parking dude from earlier? If the committee asked you what the ROI was on valet parking, the right answer isn't to calculate cost per parked car. The right answer is the ROI is in the first impression, the perceived luxury, the guest satisfaction, and the repeat bookings. So here's the 3 questions I ask if I ever find myself in one of these loggerhead committee meetings where ideas just aren't getting through. I ask, what outcome are we trying to achieve? That forces them to articulate the goal, not the metric. Then you ask them what they're optimizing for. That's generally when the metric comes into play, and you can expose any conflicting priorities between the outcome and what they're optimizing for. Then lastly, what would we do if we weren't afraid of any negative outcomes? That's going to challenge their bias towards the exploitation and get them tickling around the fringes of exploration. Now, these questions aren't going to save every idea, but they will help you save the ideas that are worth fighting for. And I think we all need to do a little bit more fighting. I think we've all been beaten down a little bit by too many knockbacks. And I think it's time to start fighting back again. If you've got an idea you're really, really strong on, you're confident with, you want to push it more, because I think it'll help us all see more interesting work out in the world. I think we all need that in a minute. And if we go back to our little Raven example, you can always use it to convince your little committee friends that they should just do a little bit of experimentation, a little bit of exploration. You can say, I'll create your, safe professional version as long as you allow me to A/B test it with this really interesting idea. Just see which one works. You got to do a little bit of experimentation every so often. Now, if you want to go a little bit deeper and learn about how I teach people how to truly differentiate themselves from their competition with one single slider, then you're going to want to watch that video next. I'll just wait.